You might be wondering what that big brown thing on the screen is. It's me. Hey, how are you? I'm in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania right now. It's 90 degrees. It's very hot. It is good to be here. In the 1900s, the American steel industry was the pride of the country. It employed hundreds of thousands of people with good-paying jobs across the Rust Belt. But then, all those jobs just started disappearing. Behind me is the Bethlehem steel plant. It was once the largest steel plant in the world. The steel from this plant was used to build some of the greatest feats of humanity: the Empire State Building, the George Washington Bridge, Henry Cavill's six-pack. Is it Cavill or Cavill?
Cavill.
Cavill? Henry Cavill's six-pack. So Bethlehem Steel ended up going bankrupt in the early 2000s, and now it's owned by a casino. In the 80s, protecting American steel jobs was one of the most important issues in US politics. To try to save the steel industry, President Carter instituted protectionist trade policy, and then President Reagan built off that. Still, none of it was enough. The industry disappeared within years. To this day, there are 304 tariffs in place to protect steel plants like this one. And those tariffs are coming at a huge cost. That cost is $5.6 billion a year, paid for by consumers who have to pay higher prices on everything they purchase. If you've bought any of these things, you've paid this tax. And where is that money going? According to the Peterson Institute, this saved, you're kidding, 8,700 jobs? What? If you just took $5.6 billion and divvied it up to the steelworkers, you could pay each of them $650,000 a year. And here's what they actually make. Are you kidding me? What is going on? As you've probably figured, this video is not about steel. It's about the fact that every single presidential administration has increased taxes on you through levying tariffs on every single thing you buy. The Trump administration added $80 billion worth of taxes, and then the Biden administration just kept all of it and added $3.6 billion more. So I started digging into all of it, and I think we're all being lied to. I mean, where is the evidence that this is actually saving jobs? And if it's not, then where is the money going? Is there a better way to save our dying industries? Do tariffs ever actually work? Let's find out. I'm back in New York now. It's raining, so you're just gonna slowly just watch me get wet on camera. Wait. So let's start from the beginning. No, that's way too early. Okay, yeah, there we go. So tariffs have been very popular throughout American history. In fact, right after the Revolutionary War, President Washington signed a 5% tariff on all imports coming to the country. And throughout most of American history, we have very high tariffs on all imports, which really only start to die down after World War II. So are tariffs good or bad? I visited the nerd paradise to find out. After looking through book after book after book after book, I was shown this thing where you basically look at this really ancient document from the 1900s. Profits of labor cap Massachusetts and relative wages. Okay. They're debating about whether tariffs are protecting wages or not. Finally, I just decided to Google it. So looking into the research, economists are actually in agreement about how tariffs impact the economy, and let's go through the data. A 2019 National Bureau of Economic Research study found that 100% of tariffs that we put on foreign imports actually is paid by US consumers. So what that looks like in practice is when President Obama put a tariff on Chinese tires coming to the country, that raised prices by $1.1 billion, and it created 1,200 jobs, but it killed 3 times as many. And when Trump came in, he raised a bunch more tariffs on things like steel and aluminum, solar panels, and a bunch of other things. Biden actually kept all of these tariffs, and it's cost consumers $80 billion, which even the Tax Foundation, which is perceived to be largely conservative, called one of the largest tax hikes in history. Trump running on tax cuts but raising taxes like that is like the worst false advertising. And the CEO of Tinder said that AI is going to help you find a relationship. Because does the CEO of Tinder think people use Tinder to find relationships? I mean, come on. It's like the Craigslist of scummy college kids.
Yo, isn't this you?
Wait, why is this showing up on your feed?
Let's never speak of this again.
And the $80 billion hike in prices hurts the lower income people the most because they have to spend a larger percent of their salaries on things like refrigerators and ACs and cars. These tariffs cost us 142,000 jobs while saving, at the most liberal estimate, 10,000 jobs. That means it costs consumers $8 million to save every single job. And those jobs still only paid like $35,000 to $50,000 at best. So where's the rest of the money go? It's going into profit for the companies that benefit from the tariffs. In fact, the Mercatus Center found the executive and CEO pay rises for no explainable reason when tariffs are put on those companies. Basically, the big guys upstairs are pocketing all the money while still laying off their employees. And that's why these industries like steel and manufacturing and automobile spend so much money lobbying our politicians to keep these kinds of tariffs in place. And if you're hearing this and feeling a little betrayed, don't worry, man, I got you. I know what it's like to be betrayed. In second grade, I got betrayed, okay? So my parents, they grew up in India and they learned British English and they would teach me British English. They would say like, hey, it's not eraser, it's called rubber. It's not bathroom, it's called loo. And when kids were mean at school, my dad, instead of saying beat them up, said, hey, Shreyas, you better go to school and beat them off. So despite 60 years of steel tariffs, what we've seen is employment in the steel industry steadily plummet. And because America's manufacturing industry has to buy massive amounts of steel that is now more expensive, the Federal Reserve found that the Trump-Biden tariffs on steel has actually cost us more manufacturing jobs than it's saved. And those tariffs were put in place in part to save the manufacturing industry. And that's why when economists were surveyed about whether they support the Trump-Biden tariffs, 30% of them said they disagreed with them and 70% said they strongly disagreed with them. It's the only thing that they agree on. In fact, we actually went and interviewed one of them and here's what he said.
Oh, you could just call me Gary.
This is Dr. Gary Hufbauer, who worked for the Peterson Institute and also used to work for the Nixon, Ford, and Carter administrations. Are we seeing the kinds of jobs that politicians are promising us in exchange for these tariffs?
No, this is an illusion. It really doesn't increase jobs, it shifts them around. So what we're hearing in the political market are the voices of the people whose jobs are being protected. Since the 2018 tariff war with China, and now Biden electric vehicles and on, we have probably increased the consumer price index by about 1% over 5 years. The estimates we've done is that the period since the Second World War up to about 2010, let's say roughly 60 years, was the best 60 years in human history in terms of raising standards of living of people around the world. The best 60 years. Very rapid growth of world trade was a big contributor to that. About 10% of the U.S. economy today, which is about a $27 trillion economy, is attributable to all the liberalization we did in the Second World War until 2018 when Trump started reversing it. So we're going to go backwards on that for the U.S., but also probably very adverse repercussions for the world as a whole.
Trade policy, tariffs, it's pretty tedious, right? Does it make you feel bored or stupid? Well, it's supposed to. Politicians and lobbyists love using confusing terms to make you think they have it under control. Or even better, for you to just leave them the alone. So here's Margot Robbie in a bathtub to explain. What, you thought we had Margot Robbie money? No, this isn't The Big Short. You're just gonna watch my face on her body for the next 2.5 minutes. All right, okay, so let's say country A wants to protect its rubber ducky producers from the cheaper import rubber duckies from country B. So country A puts a 25% tariff on country B's rubber duckies. So now the only way that country B pays for that tariff is if country B's rubber ducky producers decrease their prices by that 25% tariff so that country A consumers can buy it at the same price they used to. And if that happens, then country A hasn't saved any jobs because country B's rubber duckies are still cheaper. Now let's say country B doesn't reduce its prices by the entire size of the tariff. Only two things can happen. Country A consumers keep buying country B's rubber duckies, which means that they're incurring the cost of the tariff to higher prices. Or they switch over to country A's rubber duckies. Now what we know is that those rubber duckies were still more expensive than what they used to pay for, so country A consumers are still incurring the cost of the tariff. So country A's tariff has accomplished one of two things. Either they've saved no jobs, or two, country A consumers have to pay more money, which means they're going to save less, invest less, hire less, and so on and so forth, hurting country A's own economy. And there's a second part to this. If country A's consumers stop buying as much from country B, then country A's producers are going to stop selling as much to country B. And let me explain why. So when country A consumers buy from country B, they're putting more of their money into the international markets, and that affects the exchange rate. A currency's exchange rate is nothing but the supply and demand of that currency. And when country A buys less from country B, they're supplying less of their currency into the international market, which means the supply of the currency decreases and the exchange rate goes up. effectively meaning that country A's currency has become more expensive, and that means everything that country A's producers sell to country B have effectively become more expensive. And that means the exact amount that country A's consumers stop buying from country B, country A's producers are going to sell the exact amount less to country B. And you might say, Shreyas, on Margot Robbie's body, the exact amount, that can't be right. Well, believe it. Here's a graph of the United States trade deficit compared to the net inflows. America gets a lot of inflows because it's the world's favorite place to invest, which helps our businesses a lot. But let's say our net inflows start increasing because Americans stop sending as much money abroad, maybe because we're importing less because of tariffs. Then what we see is that automatically our trade deficit is going to increase, which means our producers are selling less abroad by the exact amount. And that means less income for producers, less hiring, less building, so on and so forth. So basically, if your country's producers are drowning, putting a tariff to help them is the equivalent of jumping to the pool and shoving their heads further into the water and then saying, yeah, you better thank me for this. Back to you, Shreyas. This is as good as it gets. Sorry, man. Our budget is like $7. Another reason why tariffs can't really save steel and manufacturing jobs is because it wasn't free trade that really killed them. We constantly hear that the American manufacturing industry is dying, being pillaged by China, but here's a graph that shows the output of the American manufacturing industry, and what we see is that it's remarkably consistent, except for recessions, and in fact, it's higher than it was in the golden age of the 90s. So what's going on? When it comes to measuring which country has the most valuable manufactured workers, America's at the top. And that's also why America, to this day, is the second largest manufacturer in the world. Here's a graph that shows the inverse relationship between labor productivity in manufacturing and manufacturing employment. And what we see is as labor gets more productive, you need less people to do the job. And what causes labor to get more productive? Technology. It's robots that are terminating the manufacturing industry. And you might think, come on, Shreyas, can't all be the robots? What about immigrants? Well, I can't speak for everybody, but I personally am here to take your job. It's not just me, okay? CEO of Starbucks, CEO of Google, CEO of Microsoft, CEO of IBM. We are coming here and taking your jobs. You need to stop letting us into your country. We only know how to hit three-pointers. We are benching all your best players. Okay, in the UK, they actually took it too far. The Prime Minister of the UK was Rishi Sunak, who's an Indian guy, and I don't know if you get it. India was colonized by England, and then the Prime Minister of the UK was an Indian guy. That's like if you bullied a kid in middle school and then he married your mom and said, you're my b*** now. Now, I'm also not saying that we didn't lose any job to China. We absolutely did, but not for the reason you would think. Here's CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, talking about why Apple does their manufacturing in China.
The popular conception is that companies come to China because of low labor cost. The truth is China stopped being the low labor cost country many years ago. That is not the reason to come to China from a supply point of view. The reason is because of the skill. In the US, you could have a meeting of tooling engineers and I'm not sure we could fill the room. In China, you could fill multiple football fields. Vocational expertise is very deep. Very, very deep here.
Basically, after we started trading with China in the 1990s, we weren't automatically destined to lose our manufacturing lead to them. We lost it because American manufacturers weren't able to keep up with them in innovation. If producers aren't constantly innovating to make things cheaper, then things are gonna get insanely expensive. Let me give you an example. This is how potato chips were made in the 1950s.
A few years ago, they started slicing up potatoes to make potato chips.
And this is how they're made now. And if today we started making potato chips like we did in the 1950s so we could save those potato chip manufacturing jobs, then a bag of chips will cost $30 rather than $6. So the truth is, if America wants to keep its manufacturing industry, it needs to innovate more. And yes, that could mean that more manufacturing jobs will be lost. I know it's unfair. I get unfair. I have a brother who's 5 years younger than me and 5 inches taller than me. I mean, do you know what it's like to find out that your parents had those genes in them and didn't give them to you? But I'm not insecure about it. My girlfriend asked me when his 18th birthday is coming up, and I said, never. He's 17 forever, as far as you're concerned, okay? Now you might be thinking, Shreyas, this has been a very long and sometimes painful to watch video about tax policy. Seems like you're upset about something. It seems like some steel worker bullied you in middle school, and now you're trying to get your revenge by ending all pro-steel tariffs. And first of all, how did you know? Don't make me beat you off. And second of all, we need to talk about tariffs because they're becoming increasingly popular again. Every single presidential administration in history has added tariffs to appease special interests. And now, some are even advocating for a 60% tariff on all imports from our largest trading partner, China. And these kinds of policies can devastate the future of the American economy. See, tariffs are a really sinister policy because it is politicians going to people who are struggling with job insecurity and then using it as an excuse to raise prices on everybody else so they can make a few select people a lot more money that in exchange increases their own campaign donations. If this was really about helping workers, we would see a lot more policies about helping workers transition from industries where employment is declining to industries where it is rising, and we are not. Food for thought. How the f does 69 News beat us to this story?